Hi everybody and welcome to section 2 on absolute value. Absolute value is pretty easy to understand and pretty easy to work with. It does get complicated, but that's down the road, a couple sections down, well, a couple courses down really, when we talk about absolute value and how it works with inequalities. But that's not what we're doing here today. We're really working with absolute value and just solving for what it is and understanding what it is. And what really absolute value kind of means is the distance between 2 points. On your odometer, whether you're going backwards or forwards, you're always counting up the miles. You're always counting up distance, and distance for the world is always positive. Yeah, you can go backwards, but still, in a sense, you're still adding up the miles. So let's just look at the definition here of absolute value, and we see it's the positive distance. And the thing to remember about absolute value is it's always positive, always, always, always positive. So it's the absolute value. It's the positive distance between a number and 0. So when you look at this graph here, let's zoom in a bit on this graph. See, we're working with two numbers here. Let's change the color. We have -3, and we're working with, down here is +3. So if I look for the absolute value, by the way, the symbols for absolute value are these little bars, straight up and down bars. So if I first look at the absolute value of just 3, what I'm really counting is I'm starting at 0, and I'm saying how many steps, what is the distance between 0 and 3? And I can just count that on the number line. 1, 2, 3. It would take me 3 steps, as you can see here by this little distance meter that's already there, is 3. Well, let's look at the absolute value of -3. How many steps away is 0 and -3? So if I start at 0, I do the same thing, 1, 2, 3. I still see that it gets me a distance of 3. And a lot of people think, well, that can't be right. Why? How can the absolute value of 3 be 3 and the absolute value of -3 be 3? And the reason is the distance between the two are the same. From here to here, as you can see, is 3. And from here to here is 3. So we're just taking a look at the space between the two numbers, between 0 and -3 and 0 and 3. That's how absolute value works. It's not an opposite changer. And a lot of people mess that up and say, well, since the absolute value of -3 is 3, that means that the absolute value of 3 is -3. And that's not right. It's not an opposite changer. Whatever is inside of it always, always, always comes out to be positive. Remember that. That's why we have this up here, double underlined with 2 different colors. It's always positive. It's never changing. It's never given the opposite. It's always positive. So let's move on and look at an example. This one says, find the number opposite of -4. So what we're going to do is start at -4. And -4 is down here, so we're going to fill in our number line here. And then the opposite number is going to actually be, if I'm looking for the opposite number, I just kind of switch the sign. So if it's negative, it'll be then positive. So that's the absolute value, not the absolute value, that's the opposite. And then we'll mark that down here. But let's take a second. Let's find the absolute value of -4. I might want to use dark color. Here's the absolute value of 4. So again, we're counting how many steps is it between 0 and 4. And here's 0 right here. So I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. Well, the absolute value of 4, which should be positive anyway, is 4. And we'll do the same thing for our positive 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, 4 steps. The absolute value of positive 4 is just 4. So notice that they're the same answer, but again, it's just positive. They're the same distance away from 0. So let's talk about range briefly here. We're going to talk about range in a couple examples, but the range between two numbers is the absolute value. And we're going to do it like this in words. And we'll use first number. Keep putting my palm on it. First number minus the second number. So we'll keep that in mind. We'll come back to that in just a minute. But just have that around, that the range is going to be the absolute value of the first number minus the second number. So we'll see what that's like in just a second. So here's some rules for absolute value, something to keep in mind. If A is positive, and of course A is our number, if it's positive, then the absolute value of A is 8. Just like I said before, just because it's positive doesn't mean it changes and becomes negative. If it's a positive number, it comes out a positive number. If it's 0, it's just 0. You can't flip 0 to begin with, so a positive 0, negative 0, that doesn't exist. So the absolute value of 0 is just 0. And if A is a negative number, it still comes out positive. Look at well, here and here. they both come out to be positive numbers, regardless of whether it started to be negative or it started as a positive. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's take a look at our evaluating some expressions. I'm going to zoom in here on our first couple. The absolute value 5, again, it's just going to take that number on the inside and make it positive, even if it's already positive. So the absolute value 5 is 5. So there's number 1. Number 2, the absolute value of 25. Again, I'm just taking that number and making it positive. It's 25. Now, number 3's got a little difference here. I'm going to highlight that we have this negative on the outside. So I kind of got to hold that negative for just a minute, and I'm going to take care of the absolute value first. So I'm going to just drop this down, and I'm going to say, what's the absolute value of 34? Well, that's positive 34. And this negative is going to tag along, and now we have a negative 24. And that's okay because we can have a negative answer as long as the negative's not on the inside. But like number 4, we're going to do the same thing. Let me get rid of this stray mark. In number 4, we have the absolute value of negative 22. So that is going to be just 22. But I do have this negative sitting out here. So that negative is going to have to come down and just follow along with the rest of the number. So our final answer here is negative 22. And lastly here, this one is just kind of like a fake. The absolute value of 0, of course, we just talked about, is 0. But since there's no negative or positive numbers, we can't change it. So it's just going to be 0 in the end. So that one's just kind of fake. The negative is worthless in this problem. So here's a wrap up of the 5 questions there. Again, absolute value is always positive, unless, of course, you have the negative on the outside and it comes down. Then you can have a negative answer. All right, so these ones are trying to find the number on the inside. So let's just take a look at number 1 here. Now, I'm trying to just guess and maybe use a little bit of mental math on what could that number be to give me an answer of 4. So really, if I take the absolute value of 4, I mean, that's easy. We have 4. So one of our answers for x is going to be positive 4. But remember, I could plug in a negative 4 here and still have the absolute value come out to be positive 4. So in this instance, I have 2 possible answers for x. I have a positive 4 and I have a negative 4. So 2 possible answers. And that kind of works here for number 2 as well. I can do the absolute value of 4.7 and still get 4.7. Or I can plug in a negative 4.7 and still get what I'm looking for, which is a positive 4.7. So I have really 2 solutions, if you haven't caught on, are positive 4.7 and negative 4.7. I can have 2 answers that will go into that absolute value and still come out to be positive. Now number 3 is a little bit different. Number 3 says the absolute value of something is negative 3. Well, an alarm should go off right now and say, wait a minute, you can't have a negative number when you're doing the absolute values. And you're absolutely right. You can't. There's no number you can place in that bracket to get a negative 3. So this one is a no solution problem. And I'm sure you'll see a lot of those. No solution. The absolute value can't equal a negative number. Here's number 4. This one's a fraction, but still nothing changes. So again, the absolute value of 2 over 9 is still going to be 2 over 9. Same if it was a negative 2 over 9. It would still spit out a positive 2 over 9. So once again, values for x, 2 over 9, or a negative 2 over 9. Okay? And that's the end of those 4. So just keep in mind, especially for these numbers 1, 2, and 3 here, we'll get out the highlighter. 1, 2, and 4. These ones have 2 separate answers. Okay, they can have 2 possibilities. Number 3, however, number 3 is a negative. You can't have a negative answer, so there is a no solution. All right. Moving on here. Now, finally, we're at the range. We talked about range a little earlier. I'll write down the formula once again. The range is the absolute value of the, let me zoom in a little bit here. first number minus the second number. Ooh, drop that off. So we have two numbers here. Find the range between negative 628 and 145. So these are two numbers. We're just trying to find the range. How many spaces are between these two numbers? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write these numbers in. It doesn't matter the order, as long as you do it correctly here, I guess. So the absolute value of my first number is negative 628 minus 145. So we're always subtracting no matter what. So negative 628 minus 145 is going to be negative 773. And that means the absolute value of negative 773 is 773. But just to show you, what if you went the other way and went backwards? What if you did the absolute value of 145 minus the negative 168? I'm sorry, 628. Well, you'd still come out with the same answer because, you know, we've worked a little bit with negatives. But if you type that in your calculator, you're still going to get, in this case, a positive 773 inside the absolute value, which still comes out to be the same answer, 773. So it really doesn't matter as long as you are doing subtraction and you're subtracting both numbers, you'll get the range. So there's that. Couple more range problems here. This one talks about the boiling and freezing point of helium. So for this one, the boiling point of helium is negative 452.1 degrees Fahrenheit, and its freezing temp is negative 458, so a little bit colder. What is the range between these two temperatures? So I'm just going to take, what color do I want here? Dark blue. And I'm going to subtract these two numbers by first putting them in the absolute value. So the absolute value of my first number, 452.1, minus, and that's a negative 458. Careful of your negatives. And then you don't really need to have your the degree symbol. I mean, that's fine. We'll live without it. So I'm just going to pull out the calculator here and do that. I got to do the inside first. So negative 452.1 minus negative 458. And that's going to spit back a 5.9, which is still inside the parentheses, the absolute value bars. So the absolute value of 5.9 is, well, it's 5.9. And I'm going to put the degrees Fahrenheit on it. So that's the difference. That's the range in temperatures between the boiling point and the freezing point of helium. Let's take a look at the next one, another gas here. This is the boiling point for radon, is negative 79.33 degrees Fahrenheit, and its freezing point is a little bit further away than it was for helium, is negative 96.07. So let's find the range between those two temps. We'll get out green again. So I'm going to zoom in here. The absolute value of negative 79.33 minus, again, this is another negative, negative 96.07. Close out my parentheses and then finish up with my bars. So once again, I'm going to do the calculator, negative 79.33 minus a negative 96.07, and I come out with 16.74 inside my brackets. So then, of course, everything in the inside becomes positive, so this is still a positive 16.74, and this is going to be degrees Fahrenheit. So that's my range. Okay, I have the range between two values here. Hopefully that cleans up. There it is. Between those two, 5.9 and then 16.74. All right, so to finish up here, I have this last slide. True or false? The opposite of a number is always negative. This one's false. The opposite could be positive or negative, so just keep that in mind. For opposites, we're just changing the sign. If it's positive, we just switch it to negative. If it's negative, we switch it to positive. That's all that is to that. Number two, the absolute value of a number is never negative. This one is true. It's never negative. Remember that. That number is always going to come out to positive. The expression negative a is never positive. That's also false. Meaning if I have a negative and then a negative 2 on the inside, hey, that comes out to be positive. Something more or less we're going to talk about a little later, but still. The absolute value of A is always greater or equal to A. This one's false too. And the absolute value of a number is always negative, and of course that again is false. It's always positive. It's always positive. So just keep that in mind. I believe that's the end. Yep, it definitely is. So thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, of course, always let me know. Always happy to help. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.